This is Greg Washington, and welcome to the next episode of Guards Down. I am out and about traveling, in the midst of COVID, but, it's for a purpose. And I have with me a very special guest today, Jason Van Camp. Jason, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Man. Appreciate you having me on. I'm here to help out however I can.
Indeed. Well, look, while we're talking, tell us about yourself.
Yeah, so I can give you the long-winded version or the short version. So I'll give you somewhere in between. You just stop me when you feel like it. I grew up in Virginia, attended West Point, played football there. So we're Army football brothers. And while I was there, I left for 2 years and I served a mission for my church to St. Petersburg, Russia. So I really started in 95 and then graduated in 01. And then when I joined the military, I was an artillery guy. Quickly went to Ranger School and then went the Special Forces route. So I became a Green Beret. Deployed 3 times to the Middle East. Spent a year in Korea. I spent some time in Mali, Africa on a mission. And I retired. I got my MBA from BYU and I retired in 2015. Medically retired a little bit early. I started experiencing a tonic-clonic seizure disorder. And it started to get progressively worse. And it's kind of crazy. I couldn't drive into work. I couldn't shoot. I couldn't jump out of airplanes. I couldn't deploy. I couldn't do anything. So finally my chain of command was like, we gotta get you out of here, bud. And so they did that. And when I left, I asked myself the same question a lot of veterans ask themselves upon leaving the service. Now what? What am I going to do with myself? And I started a for-profit business called Mission 60. It's a leadership development company. And as a result of the success of that business, I created a nonprofit called Warrior Rising. And that business helps veterans and their immediate family members start or accelerate their own businesses. And it's been fairly successful so far as well. That's me, man. That's JVC.
I got you. So when you talk about the seizures that you were having, were they from the actual trauma, or was it something that was like genetic?
So I don't have a family history of the epileptic seizures. I never had one before in my life. And I asked the doctors, is this a situation where, I'm experiencing or manifesting a form of PTSD? And interestingly enough, they said no, because, when you have a seizure associated with PTSD, you tend to protect yourself unconsciously. So if you fall down, you kind of roll to the side on your shoulder so you don't injure yourself. It's interesting how that works. My seizures, I would just flat out, face first into the concrete, into the ground. I give myself a bloody nose and black eyes and, bust my teeth a few times. And, I'd wake up and I would be confused. I'd have short-term memory loss. I didn't know where I was. It was crazy, man. It was crazy. And the doctors really never found out what the cause was. I went to the University of North Carolina Medical Center, my last visit there. They were like, listen, man, here's what we can do. We can put an EKG on your brain, and induce a seizure so we know where the seizure is occurring. And I said, okay. And then they said, at that point, we'll know where we should cut out a piece of your brain. And hopefully that'll stop your seizures. And I was like, that sounds pretty invasive. You're going to cut out a piece of my brain? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, well, would I suffer any type of long-term damages from that? Would I be like a vegetable? And they're like, potentially you could be. I was like, okay, what are my other options? And they're like, well, you could just kind of manage it and move forward with your life. And I said, I think I'll roll the dice and manage it. And so that's the decision that I made, and I moved forward with it.
Man, that That must have been very tough to get that news. Um, and I know you just like myself, you were probably looking at the military as being a career thing, right?
Yeah.
So for me, all I wanted was, like my heart was set on like making jump.
Oh, you could have been a general, man. No, I don't think I had that in me, but I did enjoy the military quite a lot. And I was almost 15 years in when I medically retired. And so I wanted to finish my 20. I was enjoying myself. It kind of felt like, when you're on a PT run and it's going pretty quick and you're doing well and you fell out of the PT run and everybody kept moving forward without you. It just kind of felt like that a little bit for me, that you didn't quite make it to the finish line, and it kind of bothers me today still a little bit. But at the same time, I never wanted to be like that boxer that kind of ran out of steam, in round 10. And I was just kind of holding
Yes.
on to my opponent and just kind of holding on until the very end, not really fighting, not really doing anything, just waiting for the final decision. I never wanted to be that guy. I wanted to continue to fight. And if I was like just burnt out, I was unhappy, I would do something different. And that's what you chose to do. And I applaud you for that. That's incredibly brave and admirable.
Look, I appreciate you, man, and your service, that 15-year service. Because I mean, when I first went to the academy, I was a freshman when you guys were leading the charge, and so y'all were my role models. Looking up, and then for you to go into the military and go into special forces, it takes a brave soul to be able to do that. And it's something about that honor and courage that we have that really just sets you apart. And to be able to volunteer your youth, volunteer your life to serve your country, and then have to deal with some really tough shit, if you don't mind my French, that's hard, right? So, let me ask you, growing up, do you feel like your peers or the people around you taught you how to deal with trauma and grief?
Yeah, it's a deep question, and I appreciate you asking me that. Growing up, my parents established sort of a fortress of solitude for me and my siblings, so we felt really safe at home. We were able to talk about things with our parents, specifically my mother. She was pretty nurturing and she was pretty open to like listening to us. My dad, not so much. He was kind of the tough love guy, and kind of ruled the house with an iron fist sort of thing. Definitely was a good coach, that kind of mentality. But I don't think that I was given the training to deal with grief or to cope with grief. I didn't really experience a lot of grief growing up. My parents came from my parents created like a upper middle class type of lifestyle for our family. My dad came from a very poor family. He didn't graduate from high school. He worked as a bartender until he joined the military. So that was kind of the background my dad grew up with. But he worked hard to give me and my siblings everything that we could want. They really did. And we didn't know. And at times we're tough in our family, and we just didn't know it. I thought everything was great.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let me ask you this. With that being said, do you feel like different cultures deal with grief and trauma differently?
Yeah, that's a great question too. Let me go back a little bit to that other question because I started thinking about some things. So dealing with grief and trauma, I guess I was sort of unintentionally introduced to a lot of grief and trauma. Growing up, in kindergarten, one of my best friends, if you can call it a best friend in kindergarten, he got stung by a bee, and he was allergic to bee stings, and he died, on the playground. And so that was kind of the first introduction to death for me. And then in high school, when we were sophomores, my next door neighbor, my best friend, 10 years, he was out on the street, some of the older kids in high school that had a car, and he jumped on the roof of the car, just kind of joking around. The car drove off, and he lost his footing, and he slipped, and he hit his head on the pavement, on the concrete, and he died. When I was a sophomore in high school, just an accident, horrible tragedy. My dad, I remember, he had a brain aneurysm when I was about 10 years old. We're watching the Redskins play, the Eagles, I remember, and we were downstairs hanging some shelves. And my dad never complained about anything. And he was like, "Hey, go get your mom." And I was like, "What's going on?" And he kind of fell down. So I ran and got my mom. The paramedics came, and they took my dad to the hospital. And, the doctors was like, "Your dad's not going to make it through the night. You go in there and say goodbye to him for the last time." And so I went in there and I said goodbye to my dad for the last time. And he was, kind of delirious a little bit, but he was saying things like, "Hey, you take care of your mom, and your brother and sister. You're the man of the house now." And that was, a coming of age moment, an eye-opening experience where, your dad's going to die, and now you're the guy in charge. So you mature pretty quick. Thankfully, thank God, miraculously, my dad kind of pulled through it after a few weeks. And then, my mother developed lung cancer when I was 11, and she was 39 years old, and she actually fought lung cancer for 11 years, and then she passed away when she was 50 years old. And so death has been prevalent in my life. It's been there, and I've never been afraid of it. But that's kind of the trauma that I've dealt with in my life. And then I saw a lot of that as well, like in combat, but the question that you asked me was growing up with grief and trauma. How was that? Now, culturally, yeah, I would love to have a discussion with you about that and hear your thoughts, man. What do you think?
Man, so for me, it's twofold. I do think that cultures cope and deal with grief differently, on the sense that when you're dealing with trauma and you're dealing with grief, that your support system is the closest people to you. And so I remember talking with someone, and they said, in their culture, grief is something that is community driven, right? They don't handle grief by themselves. They grieve with their pack, with their tribe. And so I believe within, different cultures, they still have that same mentality of, okay, when it comes to dealing with grief, we grieve together. You're not going to grieve alone. But how you actually grieve and deal with it, I do think, there are slight differences, amongst like each group. And so just to be able to identify and touch with the people around you, I think that makes a world of difference when you're going through.
I think I totally agree with you. And I think it means a lot when you have a tribe, a family, a brotherhood, a community, a group of people that you can share this experience with, to know that you're not alone, to know that you're not unique, you're not special, you're all together dealing with this thing at the same time. I think that's really powerful to know that. seen different cultures, and like I said, I've lived in foreign countries. I visited a lot of countries, but I lived in a few of them. Russia for 2 years, Korea for a year, Mali, Africa for a little bit, Iraq for 3 years, and I see in general people deal with death the same way, no matter what religion or belief system you have. It's generally a very sad thing. I know you're in New Orleans right now, and a lot of times you hear about those New Orleans funerals that are, parties and celebrations of life. And that's really cool to think about, really cool to understand. I remember in Mali, like, sometimes when people died, you ate them, like in certain of the cultures. There was a guy that was um, in the echelon tactique interarmée. So we were training him as a soldier, and he left, and we had no idea where he was. And we're like, "Where'd this guy go?" And he was AWOL and the whole thing. And they're like, "No, he had to go home because there was like a witch doctor that killed his son and ate his son to gain his son's powers." And then this guy went down there to kill the witch doctor and come back, and he came back after a couple of weeks, and he was telling us his story. And we're like, "Man, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard in my life. Like what's going on here?" And that's just how he dealt with that. That's how that situation occurred, in that part of the world, in that culture. When I lived in Russia, it was, there wasn't really an external or an outward, religious belief system at the time. It was just after the fall of communism. And so people would just kind of professionally, like almost unemotionally bury their dead. And that would be it, almost like you know, wouldn't say like a political thing, but certainly sort of like a bureaucratic thing. And then different cultures handled it differently. But I think most of them handled it in a very, you know, in a way where it honored their dead and gave them a hope and a belief that something more could happen in the future.
Yeah, that is wild about, the witch doctor story, and what happened there. It does shine light on how different cultures view spirituality and, I guess you can say, energy.
Yeah.
Right. The biggest part to it, that comes to mind is when we talk about cultures and when we talk about, celebrating life and death. I look at the military as a culture as well. And I know the special forces, that's a culture within a culture, in itself. So tell us about how your tribe dealt with, trauma and grief.
So I appreciate that. We experienced a lot of that during my second deployment to Iraq. We had a 12-man ODA, Operational Detachment Alpha. So that's an A team, a Green Beret, Special Forces team. You have about 12, 14 guys on a team. At the time, I had 12 guys, and I was the commander. One of the youngest guys on the team, one of the least experienced guys on the team. But I was the commander, right? And we went to an area in Iraq that was completely saturated with Al-Qaeda. And 4 of the 12 guys on my team received Purple Hearts on day 2 of our deployment. And we were there for about 8.5 months. On day 2, we hit an IED, and one of my soldiers, he had both of his arms completely folded back, completely broken and folded back, just kind of dangling. And the other one broke his back pretty significantly. Later on in the deployment, my team sergeant, my right-hand man, he was shot through his legs. And he went home. And my 18 Charlie, my engineer sergeant, Rob, he was shot in the head as we assaulted a building. And I was the first guy to get to Rob. And I didn't know, you learn in the military, basically medical treatment. You stop the bleeding. You find the bleeding. You put a tourniquet on it. You put some gauze on it. You stop the bleeding. You call medevac, and you get that guy out of there as quick as you can. When I got to Rob, I didn't see any blood until I pulled off his helmet, and he was shot in the head, and I just applied gauze to his head, kind of holding his head together, trying to keep him alive. And I had at the time, and I still do, a very strong belief system that, everything's going to turn out. If you're determined, you're resourceful, and you believe in it enough, good things are going to happen. Expired on the helicopter on the way to get treated. And so that was kind of a shock for me. It was traumatic for me, the whole experience. What helped me deal with that was the fact that I was a commander. I was in charge. The guys were looking to me, to set the example, to be strong. And it wasn't so much that I couldn't show my emotions, but I just had to be strong. And I'll tell you, one of the hardest things I had to do was I had to call Rob's parents, and Rob's parents, Rob Pirelli was his name, my 18 Charlie, and Rob's parents were divorced. So I had to call his dad and his mom separately and inform them that Rob had died. So it was a really tough 2 phone calls I had to make. Probably the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my life. And you could just hear the grief and the pain on the other end of the phone when I told them this is what happened. Some of the guys on my team had a really hard time coping with it. Guys who were really close to Rob. One guy in particular, he kind of had a mental breakdown and certainly had PTSD. And we sent him back to the States with Rob's body, to attend the funeral and be the representative for the team and really just take a mental break. When he came back to the team, he didn't really return all the way mentally back to the team. He was, in a way, it was weird. It was, I guess in the way that he dealt with it, he became sort of bloodthirsty. And so he was very quick to pull the trigger. I think in his mind, it was a way of getting revenge or, releasing some of that pain. And so I had to talk to him quite a bit about that. And, he kind of wanted to fight everybody. And I probably at the time should have let him go back home to recover, but I kept him on the team and just monitored him like really closely. And maybe that was the best decision, to have him among his brothers and be back on the team, because we didn't have an incident, the rest of the deployment with this individual, but I wanted him to know that he was loved, and we cared about him, and we wanted him to be healthy mentally.
Man, that's heavy. And that is some incredible leadership on your part to assess the situation, to understand your guys and as well as yourself, and really to know what your capacity, what you can handle. And so I've known, me personally, and as well as talking to like other individuals, I know when people go back or when military personnel go back home and they lose that purpose that they have in the military, they find it hard to figure out what to do next. So, I feel like you were very spot on in the sense of, this is one of my brothers. We're going to keep him under the wing and make sure he's good. So you doing that, and not too many leaders have the capacity, let alone the capability, to make those kind of calls. And so I can definitely appreciate your leadership in that sense. I strongly believe that trauma and grief shapes your life. It shapes your why. and meaning what you want to become. It shapes how you endure the things you go through, as well as your transition. And so, with that being said, just talk to us about how you learn to cope with things, both healthy and unhealthy. Being a leader in your position and your role.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. It's something that we, as a society, we need more training on. Especially when we were younger, it just wasn't talked about. Like if you were, whatever the stigma is, like you're going to go reach out and get help or talk to a therapist or well, you're weak, man. Like that's not what you do. Like that was the attitude at the time, and I'm so glad to see that attitude is flipped. You're strong if you go seek help. You're strong if you go identify and say, you know what, I'm struggling. I'm having a hard time. I need to go talk to somebody. That's a very brave thing. That's a very courageous thing. It's a strong thing to do, And so, how have I learned how to deal with grief and trauma? Well, I experienced grief and trauma growing up and then, all throughout my life. And I think the more you experience it, the more confidence you have that you can handle it when a new situation arises. At the same time, for me, it's always been about, just really knowing and believing that I'm not alone, that I could reach out to any one of my brothers or anybody else and just have a really serious, intimate, sincere, authentic conversation with someone and just say, listen, this is what's going on. I trust you enough. I have people in my life that I trust enough to share these things with. After that deployment, I was having a hard time, but not as hard of a time as some of my guys. Some of my guys were like really struggling. And it was very clear, it was very evident that they had PTSD and they weren't faking it. Because I think there are some guys that, they claim it and then, what did you really see? It's hard to say. But if someone says they have PTSD, I believe them. And the guys on my team, it was clear they were really struggling. I remember when we got back to the team room after the deployment, we had like a 2-week vacation leave essentially. And my mind was not right, man. Like I was in a weird spot. My girlfriend picked me up at the airport and she was thinking that things were going to go back to normal. And I was just like, I had those killer eyes, just like focused, just looking around when we were driving for potential threats and IEDs, very cautious about everything, questioning people, wanting to step up to people and fight people, just really out of character, really weird for me. And it felt like, for example, stop signs and stoplights. It's like, are you kidding me? Like, when's the last time I had to stop for a stoplight? Don't you know who I am? Like that sort of thing, just like a weird thing. And I spent some time with this girl and her family. And I remember her dad and her uncle, they were sitting down asking me about combat, thinking it was kind of fun and they'd hear some interesting stories. And I told them a few things that had happened. And they're like, damn, you need to talk to somebody. You've been through a lot, man. And I did. I started talking to somebody at the time and it was fairly helpful, to sit down and just get these things off your chest, because a lot of times, like what makes sense in your mind, when you finally articulate it, when you finally say it out loud, like it doesn't make a lot of sense. And you're like, I'm trying to explain what I'm thinking, but maybe, and you think about it in a different light, and you think about it in a different way. And the therapist kind of helps you to understand that, maybe you're wrong in your thinking. Maybe you should or could think about it in a different way. And so and I didn't really go to a therapist for long, but I wanted to see what it was like and kind of talk about things. It was a really rough deployment for me and the team, and it was helpful. I think it was a lot of help a lot more for some of the guys on the team. We got back to that original story. We got back to the team room, and my team sergeant was there, and he was recovering. He had been shot through his legs, and And we had some new guys on the team. And so we sat everybody down, in kind of a semicircle. And he was kind of like, yeah, this is my name. This is, how I like to do business. And this is, Captain Bandcamp. And this is, his background. This is his leadership philosophy. I want each of you to kind of share with me who you are and what you believe. And one of the new guys on the team, his name was Brian. He was a total stud, great kid. I love him to death. He kind of told his bio, and then he told a joke. It's kind of funny, And my team sergeant just lost his shit, man. He just snapped. He threw the chair, got in, screamed, weird, super awkward for everybody. And we finished. I calmed him down a little bit. We finished the session, and afterwards I pulled him aside. I was like, "Hey, man, are you all right?" Because that was not normal. And he just kind of went off on some stuff that we had, we did in Iraq that we had, not really had the chance to discuss yet. Some things that he just kind of internalized and just kind of held inside that he wanted to get off his chest for the first time in months. And that first day back, man, nobody was in the team room, but he and I were just screaming at each other, And I think it was a lot of stuff from Iraq that had just kind of finally materialized. And, we ended on a positive note. And I left, came back to work the next day, was walking down the hall to the team room, and my team sergeant was walking out of my team room, and I was like, "Hey, man, how you doing?" And he kind of looked at me. I could see that he was just crying, just bawling. And he's like, "I'm done, man. I'm done." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And he just kind of walked past me. And I walked in the team room, and I was like, "Hey, guys, you know what's going on with, team sergeant?" And they're like, "Man, he just quit." And I was like, "What did he say?" And he just they're like, "He just started crying, man, and he just quit." And so I went to my company commander, my boss, and Sergeant Major. I was like, "Hey, guys, I don't know how to handle this, but this is what happened." And they're like, "Yeah, he came in here, he told us, what he's going through. He's in no position mentally to continue on your team. So we're going to take him off and put him somewhere where he can get help. And then, we'll give you a new team sergeant." And so that's kind of what happened to us after that second deployment, man. Just really tough situation. And, the thing was weird because we had to go back to Iraq in 3 months. So it was just a short window, and that's good and bad. Good because, hey man, you just got to get yourself back up on the bike. Sometimes if you fall down, you fall off if you've experienced something negative. But at the same time, man, I was feeling nauseous knowing that I had to go back to Iraq and deal with the same shit for another 8 months. Getting mortared every day, going on missions, getting IED, getting some real combat, real firefights, doing some real stuff, for another 8 months. I was like, man, I don't know if I can do that, but I'm the commander, I'm the leader. I got to step up and be strong for my guys. And that's what kind of kept me going.
Yeah, man, you unpacked a lot right there. There's three things that you really point out, and I appreciate you sharing. And so the first one is around the signs of, well, how do you see the signs within yourself and the signs of the people around you that they're dealing with trauma and grief?
Yeah. So for myself, I don't think, because I didn't know that I was experiencing that, I wasn't looking for it. I thought I was just mad, or I was angry, I would get over it, or I was sad, I was just depressed, and it would just kind of resolve itself somehow through osmosis or whatever. And only when somebody told me, hey man, like you're weird right now, or you're not yourself, you're not acting normal, like something's up, dude. Like I think you need to talk to somebody. Like only when somebody kind of identified that for me did I have the humility enough to say, maybe you're right. Maybe I do need to talk to somebody or do something differently. And that's was the catalyst for me to go talk to somebody. For my guys, I feel like if you want to really be on a team that is operating at an optimal level, is performing at a high level, you really got to know these guys as individuals. You got to know them intimately. You kind of not just know, which way they're going to move when you're conducting CQB and what their blood type is and things like that, but really get to know what makes them tick, get to understand what they believe in, what their vision is for their life, what their dreams are, what they want to accomplish, who they are as people, their values, their characteristics, and once you kind of understand who they are as people, you start to love them, really is what it comes down to. And so if you really know them like that, and you really become brothers, when they start to act differently, you start to pick up on that right away. I mean, picking up on someone else's problems and issues, it's a lot easier, in my opinion, than kind of picking up on your own. I help a lot of veterans start businesses. And from my perspective, it's very easy to see what they're doing right and what they're doing wrong and be able to give mentoring to them. But for me, in my business, it's hard for me to see what I'm doing right and what I'm doing wrong because I'm in the weeds, man. I see so many different things. I need a mentor. I need someone to come in and say, Jason, like, let me kind of, from a different perspective, share with you what you're doing right, what you're doing wrong. And my opinion is on how you need to change in order to get to where you want to go. I think we all need that as well. Somebody who has your back, a mentor, somebody that you trust that can say, listen, you need to do something different, man. Let's talk, or let me get you help. And I think if we can find that in ourselves to trust somebody or identify somebody on your team, in your tribe to do that for you, I think that's powerful.
Yeah. No, I like how you said that, because I mean, true leadership is about caring for your soldiers. And I remember hearing, like, early on in my career, even before I had my unit, it was kind of like being a great father helps you be a great leader, and being a great leader helps you be a great father. And so being able to interact, to care for the people that are under you, and they really feel the genuine authenticness of it, makes a difference in those tough times and situations, right? And getting to know a person. And so, that kind of leads off into the other two things I was going to talk about, because, when you say you talk about signs of coping and what people are dealing with, when you're in a unit, that up tempo is so quick, you're always on the go, that one, you may not recognize that you're dealing with stuff. And so having that mentor or having someone close to you that can see those subtle differences that you may not see individually, helps makes a difference. And, for them to speak on it, and for you to be self-aware and also acknowledge it, is a big part. And then to go back to what you were talking about when you said you and your team sergeant had gotten into an argument, that reminded me of a couple getting into an argument, because, the way your unit is, whether you're in the military, whether you're in the corporate world, whether you're an entrepreneur and you're dealing with investments, when you go into a venture, you kind of intertwine just like a marriage. And so, like, it is a relationship where you're having to depend on each other. And, it put me in the mindset of being able to argue with a plan. So knowing when you're at your limit and being able to say, all right, we're here, let's cool off and talk about something else, or just knowing each other to the point where you're able to express your concerns and feelings and they're able to do the same. I mean, I think that goes a very long way.
No question. That's well said. I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah. So when you look at the signs of a person coping, both healthy and unhealthy, how can a person help themselves, and how can someone around them help them outside looking in?
Yeah, that's a good question. So how can someone help themselves, and how can you help someone else looking in? Well, I think maybe it comes down to, first, you need to find a professional, somebody who knows what they're doing. You know, because even if you have the best intentions, you know, if you're a layman and you haven't studied, the intricacies and the subtleties of being a therapist, and you know psychoanalysis and things like that, you don't want to say or do anything that could potentially hurt somebody. So I think just as long as you're there for somebody and you're listening, I think that's what's most important. Not trying to solve somebody's problems, not trying to, minimize what they're going through, but just listen to them. I think that's what's most important. And sometimes sometimes all somebody needs is to get stuff off their chest, and they feel a million times better to unpack that rucksack, and to share the load with somebody else. I think that's a powerful tool. And if someone really is going through something sort of, above your pay grade, essentially, like out of your skill set, above your limits, then you really need to recommend that they go see someone. And I would urge that person to find, to come up with a plan to find somebody that has a good reputation of helping like-minded individuals. I know you mentioned it earlier, Greg, like if you're a veteran, you want to talk to somebody who's a veteran, who gets it, who understands it. Because if you're talking to a civilian, sometimes they're like, I have no idea what these acronyms mean. I have no idea what you're talking about. I haven't experienced this myself, and they're giving you advice, and the advice doesn't make sense. Well, then you're not going to, follow through with that advice. But if you have a veteran, somebody who's experienced the same things you have, somebody who's like you, giving you that advice, oftentimes that same advice, well, you're going to listen, and you're going to implement because you trust that person, because you believe that they understand you and understand what you're going through. How do you unpack this yourself? Man, like, it's different for everybody. I think most of us, well, at least the guys that kind of, are the guys that grew up in the 70s and 80s, in the early 90s, I think, it's sort of been kind of taught that you need to hold this all in, and just kind of, nobody wants to hear this. Like, why burden somebody else? You need to figure it out on your own. And I don't know how that mentality, that mindset came to light, but it's the wrong one. You're not alone. There's plenty of people that are suffering just as much, if not worse than you are. And you need to reach out to them. And if you can focus on their problems and help them overcome their challenges, I think ultimately you're going to find that you resolve your own.
Yeah, I like how you put that. I mean, that the self-awareness aspect of it. And
Yeah, it's just deep. I mean, these are deep conversations, these are powerful stuff, man. And to be honest with you, I don't share these stories ever with anybody, but I want you to have something valuable, and I want to, if there's somebody out there suffering in your audience that needs help, I'd love to be that catalyst for change, if I can.
indeed. So what's been the toughest part for you?
The toughest part for me is understanding that not everybody is on my page or thinks like me. I would love it if we were, the guys on my team, if we were all brothers, we all thought the same, we all like, had each other's backs and knew we had to get help, like no matter how well you articulate your beliefs or your message, or how strongly, how passionately you feel about something, sometimes somebody just doesn't agree with you, and that's hard, to accept, especially when you really strongly, passionately believe in something. And the only thing you can do is exercise patience, be steadfast in your belief that whatever it is, if you believe that you need to get help, you need to help other people, you need to reach out. All you have to do is just be there for somebody and be patient and hope that they come around. Sometimes, people need to process their stuff in their own due time. There's plenty of guys out there that, man, like it almost seems like dramatic that they want to have this, this big production, and then they'll take out a pistol or a handgun and they'll shoot themselves, in front of their family, in front of their wives, or whatever. And, like these guys, some of these guys I know that they were super brave and courageous in combat, like some of the toughest guys I know, man. And people would call them a hero, but, I certainly don't think that a hero would shoot himself in front of his family, in front of his wife, in front of his teammates when they're trying to help the guy. Like that sort of thing just doesn't make sense to me. And it's tough for me to accept, especially when me and other people reached out to these individuals and they're like, we're here for you, want to help, go get help, do this, you gotta, please, like, listen to me. And they just don't. And that's hard, man, but you're not responsible for that. As long as you're doing your best to serve other people and help, it's ultimately their life and their decision. And that's the hardest thing to accept.
Man, I wasn't ready for that, but I'm glad you shared it, because it's two parts to that. You wanting to be supportive to someone else and them actually wanting help. It's one thing to be supportive and reach out, help, say that you're there and truly, genuinely mean it. And this is not the first time I've heard it, but the people didn't accept it and still chose to check out. What do you say to someone? That person that, is it like, can there be something done to help save them? And then for the person that wanted to help, that's not your burden to bear if they didn't accept your help.
We can only move forward. We can't change the past. We can't look back, and that's when you ask what's the toughest thing, that's the toughest thing, because you start to question yourself. You start to wonder, you start to say, you know what, whatever I said didn't resonate with this person. It wasn't enough. Could I have said it differently? Could I have said it in a different way? Could I have, given him some different examples? Could I have done this differently? Maybe he would have it would have been better if you heard it from somebody else, that same message. And you start to get into this guessing game, and it's destructive, and it'll crush your soul. You play that what if game, but at the end of the day, you just have to be honest with yourself and say, listen, I was here. I tried my best. I did everything I possibly could, to help this guy, and I failed. It didn't work, but I did my best. And, I'm going to carry a lot of the burden of his pain now, because I read a quote a few years ago that really impacted me. It was like, hey, when you commit suicide, it doesn't erase the pain. It just shifts the pain onto your friends and your family, and I forget how somebody said that you can commit suicide because they're in that. And if, things like that, like you never know what you can say, what you can do, even just small things, to me, I don't know, like sometimes I feel like, God tells me or shows me what to say in the moment. And I sometimes say things that I was like, I can't believe I said that. Or, like that's not really how I talk. Those aren't the words I use, but for whatever reason, I said that at that time. And maybe it impacted this person in a very positive way. But it's very difficult to play that game. And I don't want to play that game. And I don't want anyone else to play that game. And I feel like if you're honest with yourself, you did everything you possibly could, you can only move forward and say, listen, I'm going to continue helping people, and hopefully I can be somebody that somebody will listen to, and something I say will impact somebody in a way where they realize there is hope and they're not alone, and they're going to make a decision to choose life rather than death.
Indeed. Indeed. And so for you, when you were faced with those kind of situations or that situation, what did you ask yourself, and what was your plan of action to move forward? Or not necessarily what did you ask yourself, what did you ask of yourself, and what was your plan moving forward?
What did I ask of myself? I guess what I asked myself is, am I good enough? Can I serve other people? Can I add value? Do I have a purpose? Do I have a community? I think those are the questions I ask myself, being really honest with myself. And what I did to move forward was, instead of, I guess, moving forward, I put myself in a position of leadership, because I've been used to that my entire life, like growing up, playing sports, being good at sports, and being like somebody they looked up to, a captain of the team, going to West Point. Everybody there is a leader in some capacity, going into the military, you're an officer, you're a leader. You have guys that you're trying to inspire and influence others to be the best they can be. It's just a very natural role, for me. And I felt like if I could focus on being a leader and serving other people and helping other people and shifting all of my pain and all of my negativity and all of my thoughts towards, and all that meaning fuel, towards using that fuel to help other people, that's a powerful thing,
Yeah. And
that's how I felt. Yeah.
And with that being said, based on the work you're doing now, you answered what was asked of you, and you found your purpose.
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like I'm my happiest, unquestionably, when I'm not focused on myself and my own goals and what I want, but when I'm focusing on serving other people and helping them get what they want. And I try to do that through Warrior Rising, the nonprofit, to listen to guys that want to start businesses and help them start those businesses. It's incredibly fulfilling. It's soul enriching. It's having a purpose again. And it feels a lot like the military, where you were helping other people be the best soldiers, be the best people they could be. And having that feeling of family, tribe, brotherhood, community, love really is what it comes down to. Loving your fellow man, no matter what they're going through, what their skin color is, what their background is, just getting to know them personally and becoming friends with them, and then turning that friendship into a genuine, love. And that's not for everybody, but, for a lot of the people you have on your team and your tribe, that does come to fruition. So yeah, that's the best way that I could describe to help the audience kind of process that.
Yeah. Okay. So the next topic or question is around, how do you make amends? So that old saying, hurt people in the process of dealing with their shit.
Yeah. That's powerful, man. That's powerful. The golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. I lived my whole life by that. And then I heard the platinum rule, do unto others as they would have you do unto them. So essentially, what you want, how you would want to be treated, isn't how other people want to be treated. You have to find out how they want to be treated and then act accordingly. And so for me, I like the tough love. I like the blunt talk. I like, the teasing sometimes, like give me a hard time, make fun of me. And I, tell me what's wrong with me. I'll be the first one to apologize always. I'll try to be the calmest guy in the room and keep my emotions in check. That's kind of how I do my business, but other people do not like doing their business that way. And so communicating with other people, giving them a hard time, or, calling them out, or being blunt, or giving that tough love oftentimes offends people, and to my surprise, to my shock, oftentimes, it goes sideways, when I'm trying to, be charismatic or build a relationship or build rapport, and it doesn't work out. And so I do have to make amends from time to time, and I make decisions, as we all do throughout life. And when you're a leader in combat, you have to make hard decisions. And sometimes they're not the right decisions, but I've always tried to be, especially in my family with my wife, I've always tried to be the guy to own up and be accountable for mistakes and apologize first. No problem with that. I have no problem with failure. Failure is fertilizer, and fertilizer is what you need to grow, to become stronger. And you can only gain experience really through action, through doing things. And the best experience is learned through failure. So we're here on this earth, I believe, to learn, to grow, to improve, to become better, to serve our fellow man in a better way. And I feel like everything that we do is a learning experience. And if you fail, it's just giving you an opportunity to do better the next time. And so making amends, it's a necessary subsection of life. You have to be accountable and own up for your mistakes. Because some people say, hey, I live my life with no regrets. Not me, man. I regret things every single day. And that's okay. Because if you live a life of no regrets, I don't think you're living life at all.
That's deep. That is. And you unloaded some things, brother. I got some stuff I'm putting in my toolkit.
I can be deep sometimes, man. You kind of, you dug that out of me today. I tell you, man, I do a lot of shows and podcasts, and I never, ever talk about this stuff, man. So as long as I can help you and help somebody, that's listening, that I'm there. I'm there.
Mhm. Well, I appreciate you, brother. I do. So tell us what kept you going when you wanted to give up?
Hope, you know, unseen, unknown, just a belief that things were going to get better. Hope. And I think people are at their darkest when they feel like they don't have hope. But that's a trick because you always have hope. You know, there's always an opportunity that you just don't see, you don't know, you don't understand. And you know, I've got a buddy right now I'm talking to, a close friend of mine for 20 plus years. And he and his wife have been married for like 20 years, you know, and his wife um, a couple weeks ago, and she was here in tears, and she's like, I just found out he's been cheating on me for the last few months. Like, and this guy's one of my best friends. And I'm like, there's no way. I'm like, he talks about you all the time. I've known this. Like, the guy talks about how loyal he is. There's no way. And she was telling me all sorts of stuff that she knew, you know. And so I said, I'll talk to my buddy. And I talked to him. We had lunch, and we unpacked a lot of stuff. And you know, and I was like, man, I'm just here to listen. I'm not judging you. I just want you to, you know, if you got to dump stuff off your chest, man, I'm here for you. And the one thing that he said that kind of was powerful, that really kind of made me think, was, you know, I said, well, why did you do it? And he said, you know, for the past 3 years, I've wanted her to be somebody, you know, that she's not. And I was just hoping that she would turn into this person that could challenge me, that we could, you know, do these things together. And when she didn't do this, I just lost all hope. And when I lost all hope, that's when I started cheating, you know, and I was like, man, like, you realize, like, that's a trick, man. Hope is never lost. And he thought about that for a while, and he didn't respond to that, you know. But I think a lot of us make those decisions, those really dark, negative decisions, when we feel like there's no hope. But that's never true.
Mm. And I definitely agree with you that hope is the key. And like you said, it's not, it's a trick. There's never no hope. It's just your perception and view of it. And a lot of people think that when times are down, that, you know, there's nothing else to live for or to do. And so, like, for me, I know I started practicing gratitude. I know a lot of people would do mindful meditation and yoga and things like that. For me, it was gratitude, because I know I had lost my hope at one point, and if it wasn't for a close family member of mine, I wouldn't have been able to realize it and might have done something stupid. But it really brought me back to my earlier years of what I was taught about having a higher power and calling, and understanding that the storm doesn't last forever. And so, you know, when you talk about hope like that, that definitely, that hit home, that hit the heart. Okay, what caused you to correct some of your destructive behaviors?
I want to say maturity and experience, and then time. You know, it takes time to process things. And seeing other people that are going through the same thing you're going through, or possibly even worse than what you're going through, and seeing how they are able to overcome it. And that gives, it gave me hope. It gives you kind of optimism that things are going to get better. And like you said, it's only temporary. It's only a temporary thing. And so seeing other people, um, I've often thought, when I was younger, and maybe in OIF 1 or 2 or something, if I had been blown up and lost some limbs, I think that would have been really, really difficult for me. I would have had a hard time coping with that, a real hard time. you know, but after seeing guys that got blown up and they were missing limbs and seeing how they were able to live their lives in a very positive way and they were happy and they were optimistic and they could get by, like knowing a lot of guys that are friends of mine, close friends of mine that are triple amputees, double amputees, single amputees, guys like that. Had I gotten blown up, later in my career, knowing those guys and seeing how they've been able to live a fulfilling life and a life of purpose, like I would have been able to handle it pretty damn well. I feel like, I mean, it certainly would have been, pretty hard to take, and to overcome and process that. But knowing guys and seeing guys and being a part of a team, a community, a tribe of guys that experienced all that and were able to overcome and are leading incredible lives right now, that gives you hope, and I feel like for me, I sat back and I watched, I observed, I looked at people, I saw what other people did. And through that process, I just continued to get better and better and better and deal with it and cope with it. Until finally I was able to get to a spot where it's a part of me. Everything that I experienced is a part of me, but it doesn't define my identity, And I think if you let these experiences define your identity, that's when you get into trouble. Like I served in the military. I was a Ranger. I was a Special Forces guy. That's something I did. That's not who I am. You know what I mean? If somebody experiences a traumatic situation, it's like, listen, that's just something that happened to you. That's not who you are. If you have a strong identity and you know who you are, I think you can overcome that trauma. But anytime it affects the way that you look at yourself and your identity, I think that's when you really get into some trouble.
Yeah. And I like how you put that. What you do does not define who you are. And it also leads into the reason why I asked that question, right? So what caused you to correct your destructive behavior? And the next part of that is, do you feel you have to wait until you're upon your darkest hour to make a change?
No, the simple answer is no. But at the same time, I'll tell you, everybody processes things differently. For example, some of my friends that got blown up, if I were to go into their hospital room while they're all bandaged up, with a breathing tube down their throat, and I were to say, hey, man, like, get over your shit. Like, come on, man, you can get over this. Like, stop feeling sorry for yourself. That's not a good time to do it. You know what I mean? Like, they're like, listen, this just happened to me. Like, I need time to like process this, to understand this, to feel sorry for myself, to feel this, for a certain amount of time specific to me. And then once I'm ready, yes, I need you to come in here and help me understand, like, okay, now it's time to get over this. Now it's time to move forward. And now it's time to do this. And because it's specific to the individual, it's not up to you to determine when that person is ready to move forward. You just have to be patient and ready and willing and be able to listen to that person until they are ready to move forward. All you can do is inspire them to move forward when they're ready. I look at it like this. A lot of players say, that I work with at Mission 60, they're like, Jason, just motivate me. Just motivate me. I need motivation. And I'm like, man, listen, I'm not going to give you that. And I can't give you that. I can't give you any motivation. They're like, well, what are you talking about, man? That's what you do. I'm like, no, man, I can only inspire you to motivate yourself because I'm not going to be here 24/7. I'm not going to be here all the time. I can't hold your hand on this thing. You are the guy that's going to have to do this yourself. You're the guy that's going to have to get out of bed every morning. You're going to have to do that. If I can inspire you to do that, well, goddamn, I'll be that guy. I'll try to help you do that. But you're going to have to motivate yourself because the only true motivation is self-motivation.
Yeah. Shoot. Man, you getting home. I'm learning so much. You got me in my feelings because you hitting some points that I had to deal with in life as well. And I can just see it in you. So let's talk about getting help. So did you have to seek professional help? And what would you say to somebody in need of help?
Yeah, so I unpacked a lot of my stuff to some close friends. And because I know they were veterans as well, they had gone through some serious stuff also. I knew they could give me some good advice, and I knew that they would listen to me and they wouldn't judge me and they wouldn't, tell me what to do, sort of thing. I just wanted someone to listen to me, And one of the guys I talked to, he was like, "Hey, man, I seek help. I go to a therapist, and this is what we talk about, and this is how it's helped me." And he was talking about how much it impacted his life and how happy he was, and he just loves talking to this guy that he goes to, and on and on and on. And he was like, "You should do this as well. Like, I'm not telling you what to do, but like, if you want to do this, like, here's a guy I know." And it was uncomfortable for me, but I embrace that deliberate discomfort mindset. I talk a lot about that in my business, and I truly believe that. I try to live my life by that principle. Like, if it's uncomfortable, if it's something that you're afraid of, confront it. And I felt uneasy. I felt uncomfortable about going to talk to somebody. But I had hope. I wanted to see what it was like. And I thought, you know what, maybe it's a bunch of BS. Maybe it's, not helpful at all. But I'm going to be brave enough and courageous enough to see what it's all about. And I went, and it was different. It wasn't what I expected. And the guy I talked to, we hit it off pretty quickly. And he was pretty easy to talk to. And it really helped me kind of think through things, because I said earlier in the show, a lot of stuff that was going through my mind that made a lot of sense. When I said it out loud, it didn't make any sense at all. And the therapist kind of helped me kind of work through that. And it wasn't like, when you leave the office, when you look back at everything, it isn't like this dude is like solving all of your problems. He's basically just listening to you and helping you solve your own problems. That's what it all came down to. And it was a positive experience, and I would recommend anybody that's afraid, uncomfortable, not really sure, give it a shot. Give it a shot. And I'm not going to promise you that you're going to love it or it's going to help you, but just give it a shot. And I think it's going to be valuable. I think you're going to find that it's going to impact your life in a positive way. At least that's my hope.
Yeah. So with your therapist, and I ask this question because I'm looking at cultural sensitive therapy, meaning your clinician or therapist, mental health professional looks like you or been through similar experiences, then the premise is that the connection will be a lot deeper, which will help make the treatment more effective.
Yes.
When you got help you know, did those type of things matter when it came to your counselor?
Yes, it did. I think it's different for everybody. You know, for me, I wanted to talk to a veteran. I wanted to talk to somebody that had been to combat, that had that understood. It didn't matter to me if this person was black or white or female, even as long as they'd been to combat and they were a veteran, I was going to give them a shot. You know, and and see if we had a connection, if we had a bond, if we had chemistry, sort of thing. Um, I didn't want to talk to because I think previously I talked to somebody who wasn't a veteran, and it was just kind of annoying a little bit, kind of painful to talk to somebody and explain to them what I was talking about. It wasn't good connection, it wasn't good chemistry for me there. It didn't matter to me if the person was special forces or not. I know that does matter to a lot of guys. So it's sort of an individual thing. If you're comfortable only talking to women, great. If you're only comfortable, talking to a special forces guy because you're a special forces guy, great, do it. Whatever you feel comfortable with, go in that direction, go that route. That's what I would recommend.
I appreciate you sharing it. What advice would you give your younger self?
Oh man, I think about that all the time. I think about like going back in time and sitting down with my West Point freshman, new cadet Jason Van Camp. I would sit that dude down and I would just say, listen, you're going to fall down a lot. No matter how many times you fall down, you get yourself back up. And the quick as you can get yourself back up, that's going to determine your success in life. I would show new cadet Jason Van Camp what hard work really looks like, because I thought I knew what hard work was. I thought that I worked hard my whole life, like conditioning, weight room, like putting in extra work. Nah, man, like as I move forward in life, I see what hard work looks like going through Army football with, Scott Swanson, Satan, him pushing you. You think you know what hard work looks like. And then you go to Ranger School and you're like, oh my God, this is what hard work looks like. And then you go to Special Forces and you're like, oh my God, this is what hard work looks like. And then you kind of keep pushing yourself, moving forward and forward and forward, meeting new people, pushing yourself harder and further and faster and, becoming stronger. I would really try to introduce that understanding of hard work at a much earlier age to me. But that's a great question. I could probably write a book about all the things I would say to, 19-year-old Jason Van Camp. Don't be a dumbass is probably the best piece of advice I could give him.
I like that. I agree. Well, do you see your growth?
Say that one more time.
Do you see your growth?
Do I see my growth? Yes, I do. And I'm not saying that in an arrogant way or a braggadocious way. I'm saying that because a lot of people put their heads down and they dig and they just move forward, and they don't ever take a moment to take a step back, lift their head up, look around, and look behind them and see how far they've gone. I've got friends, plenty of them, that are just like forward focused, and that's great, but you need to take a moment from time to time and look back and see what you've accomplished. And it's not a negative thing to take pride in what you've accomplished and to acknowledge your growth and to say, I was here, now I'm here. That's not bad, but I also, looking forward, I want to get here. And if you don't appreciate what you've accomplished, if you don't appreciate those moments, I don't think you can fully appreciate the journey.
Yeah. I like that. I agree with you. Okay, so tell us about what you're doing now. Mission Zero, the whole nine.
Yeah, Mission 60 M60. It's a company I created about 8 years ago, and it was an idea of bringing together the best leaders I've ever met in my career. Guys I worked for, guys that were my peers, guys that worked for me, friends, Medal of Honor recipients who were friends of mine. Guys that um, I wanted to create. It's really all about. I think it's all about for me creating something special. And helping other people, serving other people. And if you can do that with people that you love and that you look up to and that you consider part of your personal team, I think that's the ultimate. And so I identified these guys, and I thought to myself, if I could put my kids in a room with these guys, and just have them soak up everything that they are, like that would be the ultimate for me. And so I got them all together, and I said, hey, what do you guys think about talk about what we know, what we've learned, in the military, our own personal experiences, and they all said yes. And so we moved forward with that, and I started, thinking to myself, well, I played football, I love football, I'm passionate about football. Maybe we could get some clients that are football teams, and I started cold calling NFL teams. I found a list of phone numbers on Google, and I just started alphabetically, Arizona Cardinals, Atlanta Falcons, Buffalo Bills, Carolina Panthers. I just started cold calling teams. And the first call, I was like, hey, I don't know who I should be talking to. This is who I am. This is what I do. Click, hang up the phone. Next one, I find out that I'm supposed to be talking to a certain director on the team. Okay, now I start getting some names. Now, and I go down the list until I get to the New York Jets, and they gave me an opportunity to pitch to the team, to the head coach and GM, and I did, and they gave me a contract right off the bat, my first contract for an entire year with the team. And from there, we started working with a number of other NFL teams and Major League Baseball teams, and then corporate clients, and then we just kind of pivoted the business as we've grown and realized we need to bring science, PhDs, researchers, experts into the team to really kind of balance us out and to add significant value to what we teach. And wrote a book called Deliberate Discomfort. It was published in February, and it is #1 Amazon bestseller, 18,032 copies so far, and really highly reviewed. People like it, so I'm deeply honored to hear that. And we have workshops now. Masterclass workshops now. And so if you want to learn more online, because COVID's really been difficult for us, we do the keynotes and the workshops, and most of our clients this year have canceled or postponed because of the coronavirus. So we've kind of transitioned to online training. And we launched that about 3 weeks ago, and it's been going really well. So we were struggling for a few months trying to figure out what we're going to do next, and kind of putting together this video masterclass. And now that we have it out, it's going pretty well so far.
Awesome. I'm gonna have to read Deliberate Discomfort.
Yeah, shoot me your address. I'll send you a copy. Don't worry.
Thank you. Well, look, Jason, I appreciate you coming on and talking with us and sharing, your experience and your efforts and your growth. I definitely learned something today. And so, for that, I thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. It was a deep conversation, man. We got raw, we got authentic. And if you need anything from me, like you said at the beginning of the show, like mentorship or, advice or, introducing you to other people, let me know. I got you, man. Anything you need, consider me a guy you can go to.
Indeed. Okay. Well, any words of wisdom or encouragement before we sign up?
I'll just tell people, hey, you're not alone. You're not suffering alone. You got people out there that need your help and want to help you too.
There we go. All right, everyone. Well, this is Jason and Greg with Guards Down signing out.